So in today's video we're going to be making amber with resin and wire wrapping. Let's go! Right, we are back. So today we are going to be trying to make amber with resin. Now I highly stress, if you're going to be selling these, please make sure that you put in the description that these are made of resin. There's a lot of fake amber going around and people aren't declaring it's fake, but just don't do it. It's not good. So for this one, this is completely optional. You don't have to do this. I've gone looking for a poor dead bug and I found one stuck in a bit of fluff that was inside an old vase. It looks like a beetle or something, but we'll clean that up. But you could find something that resembles a bug. I mean, this was a seed off of a plant. I think it's a seed. Kind of looks a bit like a mosquito. Or a bird. Looks more like a bird, but we're not going to use that. And then I've just got some dried leaf. So I'm just going to literally just crumble that into the resin as we're making it. Now, with this, I do want some bubbles because amber does sometimes have natural bubbles inside. So I think that would be harder to create with a two-part resin because those bubbles have time to rise. So I'm going to be doing this with UV resin. I might do it in layers. I'm not 100% sure yet. Now I did this on a TikTok maybe a couple of years ago now when I first started resin. So I thought I'd do an in-depth video, but we're going back to the old mould because I quite like these shapes for a polished amber stone. And then I'm going to wire wrap it. Let's go. So for my colour, I'm going to use the liquid resin pigment dyes. Now I've dug out three of the colours to try and get the colours right. We're going to tint it with a little bit of red in some of the areas just to make it look a bit more natural, but I think we're going to go with the orange and red, but we'll see as we're mixing. Now don't use too much of this stuff because it will affect the curing. Okay, I've got my little lamp set up ready to go, so we're just going to start mixing our colours. Right, so I'm just going to pour some of my UV resin. This bottle's running low. Pour some of my UV resin into my mixing cup. And please don't skip to the end of my videos. It's been quite a few videos now. I've uploaded it at say 8 PM and within 3 minutes I've got comments like, oh, that looks amazing. As you know, what it's doing, I can't stress this enough. What it's doing is if you're skipping to the end of my videos, it's telling the YouTube algorithm that my video is not of a decent quality and it's not worth watching. So if you can't watch it now, just save it to your watch later playlist. Or click that little cog up there and put it in 2 times. So it will speed the video up. And as always, massive shout out to my channel members. Thank you very much, and to anyone who's new to my membership. So I've just added 1 drop of the coloured dye to begin with. And we're just going to mix that in and try and match it. You can get an image up on Google to colour match. And we're just going to mix that until it's at the we want it to be clear. That's the good thing about these dyes. They're not opaque. And again, bubbles really don't matter. And then I'm just going to drop one of the reds in. And then just not fully stir that. I want some streaks. Like so. I wonder if I could do that with the yellow as well. There's similar streaks of yellow. Should have really dropped the yellow and the red at the same time. Let's see what happens when we pour that into our cavities. The red's not really coming through, but we can always stir some of that. I'm going to do 2 and we'll pick the best one. As mentioned, I'm going to do this in layers. So let's try and get some of that red in here whilst we've got it in our resin. Just stir that in, not fully, and then maybe up here in this one. Just try and blend it so that it's not too streaky, but it adds a darker area to the top of our pieces. Okay, I'm leaving the bubbles and we're just going to give that a 2-minute blast of our lamp. So now I've just got one of these dried leaves. I'm just going to crush that up as best I can into this small mixing cup. I'm not going to use it all. And I've cleaned off most of the fluff and the bug, but it's very fragile. And again, it is optional. I know it could come across as a bit gross, but let's give it a new life and a piece of art. So I'm just going to top these up. Actually, that bug may float. So what I'm going to do is just place that now. Add a small amount of the resin over the top. And just bond that in place. Again, I'm not worried about the bubbles. And then we can just top these up. And then what I'll do is add the leaf just in a moment before we cure that. Get it all out. So we've got our leaf. I don't want to take too much away from that bug, so I might put some at the top and then some at the bottom. Sorry. And then we can just dip that down into the resin. Let's go with a bigger chunk. I went to move the bug then, but I'd forgotten that it's already set. When you want some bits, I mean, you could go with gold flake as well. I know gold flake's not natural, but it will give it a good I don't know, what's the word? It will look nice. That will do. I think I used gold leaf in my TikTok video that I mentioned. I think that will do. I'd even put a small stick in there. Let me see if I can find one. Let's put it in this one. And again, we just give that a cure. And then if you get any shrinking, just top up the back. I'm just using a clear now. It's not going to matter. Just top up the back. Again, I've got some bubbles in there, but I'm not worried about those. And give that its final cure. Okay, had a bit of an accident here. We had like a volcano where that bubble was. I pushed it down as much as I can, but I have to file that down. I'm being careful at this point not to touch the front. The bug's not really visible. Maybe the colour was a bit too strong. I'm just going to flip these out, and then just to be doubly sure they're not sticky, you could leave them in the sun. I'm just going to give them another minute on the top side. So all I'm doing now, because my mould had lost its shine, I'm just adding a drop of UV resin and using an old paintbrush. You can clean this afterwards with some isopropanol. I'm just glazing that front of each piece. And just make sure the bristles don't fall off. And just kind of go over the whole piece. You don't want any impurities. I find this with a paintbrush is much easier because you haven't got the mess on the underside to clean up afterwards. Okay, so we're going to wire wrap this one. This is a voiceover, this part. I forgot to turn my music down. So we've just got square 21 gauge wire here, and then we've just got 24 gauge half round wire, and this is just a cheap tool set I got from Amazon. So I've just cut 3 lengths around about 10 inches 11 inches of the square wire, and then probably about 4 inches of the half round. So I found the middle of my 3 pieces of square wire, and I'm just beginning to wrap the half round around. Just make sure that the domed part is facing upwards and the flat side is facing down. So I just start off a few wraps just to get the wires tight, and just keep wrapping that round until you've got the length that you really want to go with. I went with 10 wraps on mine, but it depends on the size of the piece that you're making as well, so you can do whatever you want really. I'll just keep chasing that round, not pulling it too tight because you don't want to snap the wire. This is quite a soft copper wire, this one. Again, all the products that I'm using I will put in the description box below the video. Just click more and you will see my description box come up. So once you're happy, just snip off those excess wires, but leave enough to be able to tuck into the center, roughly the center of the 3 wires. And I've said this before in previous wire wrap videos, I'm not a professional at this. This is just something that I've kind of taken up as a kind of hobby alongside the resin art. So I wouldn't have started wire wrapping without Mark, aka the Wire Wizard, who sadly has passed away recently. He kind of got me into wire work. We did a collaboration when I first started resin. I sent him off one of my pieces and he wire wrapped it and sent it back with a lovely note. Sadly, we have lost Mark, which is a massive shame. I kind of learnt a lot from Mark and he learnt a lot from me. He started to do resin and wire wrapping his pieces as well. So yeah, it's such a shame. So there I've got my half round in the center, and I've just begun to shape the 3 pieces of copper around my cabochon. Now I'm just wrapping the sides as well, and I'm going to copy what I did in the center and go around with 10 wraps in total, just on each side, just to hold the wires together a bit easier and give it a nicer finish once it's completed. So you can slide these up and down once you've done them, just to get them in the right place really. So these are still a little bit too high, so again I'll just slide them down a bit. And that's the good thing, is you can still move things around at this time. And just sizing stuff up, realizing that again I need to move them down a little bit more. So I'll just put the stone in just to make sure it's sitting right, and then I'm just going to bring up these wires. This area here will become our bail, and our finishing area basically. So we want to shape this, but we also want to make sure that the stone is held really tightly by those wires. I highly recommend watching some of Oxana Craft's videos. She's been a massive help to me as well along my little wire wrapping journey. So there we go. I've kind of got it roughly where I want the stone to sit, and I'm just using my pliers now just to give those bale wires a good bend so that I can clamp them together with some more half wire just to really hold that stone in place. So there you can see I've narrowed that gap at the top now. So I've cut off a good maybe 12 inches, 13 inches of the half round wire now. And I'm just going to begin to basically bond these 6 wires together with the wire. Bond's not really a good word to use. Hold them all together. Begin our bale, so to speak. So I'm just doing a few wraps. And just be sure those wires stay square and touching each other, and they don't twist and kind of fall into each other like fingertips, you know, crossing in your hands. So it's just a kind of keeping those in place and just wrapping round and making sure they're secure. And I think in total I went around 5 times, I think, just to hold that in place. Just as you're going, just push those wires down so they're touching a bit better. Just slide them down, and then you can just continue just wrapping that wire around. I can't even guess the amount of times I'm going to say wire through this video. You'll also see that I left the tail at the beginning because we'll use that afterwards. So it's probably an inch at the beginning of the wrap, and then we're just going to continue using that excess wire at the back to complete the bale. So I'm just using my nylon pliers just to pinch those together, just to make them a bit more tighter, a bit more snug. And there's me counting 5 wraps in total, and that is what we are looking at the moment. So now is to pull out the front 4 wires. Just bring them out of the way, just pull them forwards one at a time, and just get them out of the way so we can then work on those 2 back wires, which will be at the back of the piece. I'm sorry if it's a lengthy video. Again, put it in 2 times speed if you must, and then if you need to come back to it, you can just skip through different parts and work out where you're up to if you're going to do this. So now we have those 4 wires at the front, we can then begin to use that long tail that we've left at the back to begin to wrap those 2 bale wires. And then I'm just grabbing my stone again just to make sure, not that anything's really moved, but I'm just making sure that I'm just showing you roughly where we're at. So now we just take that long tail and we begin to wrap. Now this can start to twist, so just make sure that you're keeping that round part of the wire facing upwards. It's more likely to twist when you go round that first couple of times. So the amount of times that you go round these 2 will determine the size of your bale at the end. And just push those wires again, just push them down as you're wrapping, and just keep following them round, making sure they're square and making sure they're tucked together quite nicely, nice and tightly. And then just keep going. I'm just using my nylon pliers as an example. You can kind of hold them on the wires and then wrap round with the other hand if you need to, or just use them every now and again just to make sure that they are straight and they're keeping their place. So here you can see I've gone round quite a bit, but now I want to place the stone again and then just hold that in place, get that held so we can then continue with the rest of the wire work. So once you're happy it's in place, I think it does slip out at this point. It's going to happen. We just want to start to work on the frame that's going to hold the stone in place. So I'm just making sure that it's flat with the back of the piece, and then I'm just grabbing those back wires in each section, each of the 4 sections, and just bending them out slightly. You can see on both sides here. Ignore the back, it's a bit messy. And then we're just grabbing the front wires and doing pretty much the same as what we did on the back, just pulling them forwards. And these will basically brace the stone. I did think about cutting my nails before the video, but to be honest with you, nails are quite helpful when it comes to wire wrapping, so don't judge me. So I'm just pulling those out, and I'll show you. And just keep that middle wire as close to the back as possible, but not so close that it's going to shoot off and the stone's going to pop out. So there it is so far. And now we can bend these back sections in with our pliers. Now this can be a bit tricky to get it symmetrical, but I'm just grabbing the wire and just twisting the pliers, and then I'm just mimicking that on the other side. Doesn't have to be perfect because it is the back, but you can see just how that is framing and holding that stone in place. So that's what it should look like on the back. Now I could do the same with the front. You are at risk of scratching the stone, so I'm just going to use my nails because it gives a similar effect anyway, and I just pull those together with my nails. So now to just snip off that excess, I wrapped up a little bit more. Again, just allowing enough of a tail to just tuck over the back, which will be on the inside of the bale once it's complete. And then just clamp that down again with the nylon pliers. And there we have our bale length. So now it's just a case of bending that down. Just, you know, don't rush this. You don't need to rush it. You can use the tool to bend the wires around, but I'm just shaping it by hand and just bending them over bit by bit, just kind of flexing the wire as I go. And you want to bring that down as close to the beginning of the bale as possible. You kind of want the bare wire and the half round wire to line up on the back. So I tried to do this bit by hand completely, but you will need some pliers just to shape that a little bit better. Just to bend those 2 wires outwards, and then you can then push in the wires until they meet. So I should have left a bit more of a tail at the beginning, because ideally you want to wrap this a few times. I only had enough to go around it once, but the rest of the wire work does hold it in place afterwards. So if you don't leave enough, don't panic too much, because we can always fasten that bale with the rest of the wires that we've got hanging over the front. So now I'm just bringing that tail all the way around and just grabbing those 2 bale wires, just pulling it again, not too tight, but tight enough to kind of hold them in place and bring them back to the back. And again, I'm no pro at this. I find it quite therapeutic. So with that remaining tail, I'm just wrapping that round the left hand wire from the bale that we made. I'm just pulling it quite tightly. I'm wrapping it round twice just to hold it in place. And then we will snip that off. And this will all be tucked away anyway, so it's not going to be sharp. We just snip that off. and just clamp that down on that wire. Again, just pushing them up tightly so they're not going to move. So this is where we're at, and now we kind of need to work out what we're going to do with all 6 of these wires. Now this did take me quite a while to work out in my head. I began to shape them into a heart shape, which I've done in a previous wire wrap video on here, but I do change my mind with that because I just had brain fog and I could not work out exactly how I wanted these wires to work. I really couldn't. I got them to look how I wanted at the front, but then my brain just could not compute the rest of the wire work. So at this stage I decided to tackle the back 2 wires and leave the front, because I really couldn't think about how I wanted to finish off those 4 wires. So I just snip those off and curl those up so they're hidden away at the back. So there you can see I've just curled those with my rounded pliers and just tucked them inside. Now this is where Oxana has come in to the rescue. I had to watch one of her videos quick just to work out something different that I could try with these 4. So I just begin to straighten them out a little bit, and yeah, just follow one of her videos. I'll pop the video in the description. I mean, she does it much better than me, obviously. So I'm just following the end of one of her videos, how she finished off one of her similar shaped pieces. So I've just brought those right hand 2 wires around into a curve, and then I'm just bending them up again and just using my thumb to hold the first wrap in place to then be able to bring down the next twist in the wires. Again, just take your time with this. Once you've got these tight curls, it can be difficult to kind of backtrack. So just keep moving stuff around until you're happy with it. And there you can see I've got my 2 coils, and then I'm just bringing those wires around the back of the piece just to hold those 2 swirls in place. And now to do the same with the left hand too. And just again, just bringing those round the once on this one and just pulling them one at a time just to get them quite tight. And then just again bringing those round the back, just adjusting as I go. And just like resin art, there's so much to learn when it comes to wire work. There is so much. So now again, I'm just going to bring those a bit closer to the first 2 coils and just make them look like they should be in place, really, because they looked a bit on their own and a bit separated from the first bunch. So I kind of wanted it to look a bit fluent. So with these 4 wires, like I said before, I'm going to use this bottom one just to bring it round and make sure that that bail is definitely not going to go anywhere. Oxana didn't do this in her video, but I knew I had to do something just to clasp that bail with a bit more security than that one wrap with the half round. So it's kind of hidden underneath that coil anyway, and it's brought me back to where I want it to be on the back. So what Oxana did in her video now was just straighten these 4 out and then just cut them one by one and tuck them to the inside of the bail so they're not going to be seen and they won't catch on anything. And there you can see them tucked in, all done. As always, give the video a thumbs up, drop me a comment, and if you haven't subscribed, hit that button for me. I'm super happy with how that's turned out. You can do this in lots of different ways, just have a little play around. Right, I will see you for the next one. Bye for now.